Hello and welcome to a fresh new episode of The Bike Show, an episode where we see the value of a performance exhaust not in terms of weight saved or horsepower gained, but in the way it can affect your personal life, thanks to Don's exhaustive testing. Quickly moving on, we'll be taking a closer look at the electronic side of performance enhancement with the latest developments at the Italian tech giant that is Dimsport. But first we're going to take a stroll through the international biking news because it has been an interesting last couple of weeks in terms of the press releases that clog up my inbox. Let us begin with something for the lovers of American iron, although to be fair, I'm not sure the traditional fans of Harley-Davidson are as yet totally on board with the newest models that we've been treated to from the brand that has built its reputation, at least aesthetically, very much on the dim and distant past. Harley impressed many, not least me, with the excellent first-time job they did with the Pan America adventure bike and all the new technology and engineering that entailed, and with Don also being impressed after his first ride on the Sportster S. I can only applaud their recent efforts. Well, being me, I can also moan a bit. There's no denying that some areas of the build quality on the Pan America are a bit ropey, but it's a good start. The Sportster S is a funky looking machine with some proper horsepower, proving, I think, that competition from Indian Motorcycle obviously is good for the breed, but it is expensive. And since the Sportster used to represent the most affordable way into the Harley-Davidson brand, there was still something missing from the range. That something has now been revealed, and it is the all-new Nightster. This uses a 975cc version of the 1250 V-twin found in the Sportster S and Pan America, a capacity that was initially earmarked for a sportier naked bike to be called the Bronx. Unfortunately, that model seems to have been a casualty of Harley's recent boardroom battle and subsequently revised product planning, but who knows, it may reappear again in the future. The 60-degree V-twin has a smaller bore and stroke to reduce its capacity, but it's also more simple than the 1250. The result is a 90 horsepower engine, so a loss of just over 30 horsepower compared to the 1250 in the Sportster S, which itself is 20 or so down on what the same capacity motor offers in the Pan America. But it's still a lot compared to what the previous Sportster offered, which was so embarrassing I could never actually find a number in Harley's spec sheets. There's the same 6-speed gearbox as the Sportster S. You get sport, road and rain riding modes, with the rain chopping power by about 15%, I think it is, as well as softening throttle response. The chassis follows the same format as the Sportster and Pan America, with the engine forming the backbone, if you like, with the front and rear ends, a simpler swing arm than the Sportsters in this case, being bolted directly to either side of the motor. There's a 19-inch rim at the front and a 16-incher at the rear, improved ground clearance compared to previous models, so you'll be able to actually enjoy some corners rather than avoid them. And in case you get all giddy because you found some corners, there's traction control, ABS and Harley's version of a slipper clutch. The looks take some styling cues from earlier Sportsters, including the tank shape that in this case is actually the airbox because the fuel sits below the seat, meaning you fill it up by lifting the seat. I think it looks the part overall, the bike, and it seems on the face of it that Harley-Davidson's run of good form will continue with this Nightster. If you want one, then be prepared to pay. It may be a cheaper entry-level Harley, but that doesn't mean it's actually cheap. Judging by the prices over here that start at around about 16,000 euros, you'd have to think that the bike will retail for at least 260,000 Rand in South Africa. Moving on then from an expensive-ish bike, let's now consider an expensive helmet that retails for 14,000 Rand. Actually, considering it's a smart helmet, it's not such a frightening price. Many of the flagship helmets from the big legacy brands like Arai, Shui and AGV are already heading in that direction, and they don't have any of the techie features of the Mark 1S from Australian startup Foresight. So what sort of tech are we talking about? Well, what we have here is a pretty lightweight carbon fibery construction that contains a chin-mounted action camera, Harman Kardon speakers built into the interior, some internal lights that are used to inform you of certain navigation information, and there's a handlebar mounted controller for the whole system that works in parallel with a dedicated Foresight app. The good stuff includes the fact that the helmet is quite the looker, a normal size and not swollen and disfigured like so many of its competitors. The interior speakers that can be used for music or navigation or communicating via your phone are high quality. There's 2 mics built into the chin area of the lid, and they also, apparently, provide good quality for anyone you call or chat within your riding group. The action camera has been very neatly fitted into the chin bar and it records in full HD. The interior lights can indicate which direction to turn next and warn you of any impending hazards or traffic on your route. I've hunted down some feedback from those using this and previous versions of the helmet, and the negatives at this point would seem to be that the camera doesn't feature the sort of magical software stabilization you get in something like a GoPro, so it's more useful for perhaps recording your point of view in an accident, but the footage will otherwise be too shaky to use in a video. A shame, because otherwise I'd definitely have been interested myself. The handlebar mounted controller is a good idea, but it currently features apparently quite unreliable pairing with your phone, disconnecting far too often. The navigation is also limited to Foresight's own app, and that apparently is absolutely awful compared to the sort of thing offered by Google Maps or Waze. And bike-to-bike chat, although clear enough, is limited to communication with other Foresight helmet users, and there's not likely to be too many of those amongst your riding buddies, certainly at the moment. On the plus side, this young company seems to look after its early adopters, takes feedback on board and helps out wherever it can. It's a crowd-funded product that looks like it deserves a future, and if you buy one now, you can be a part of shaping that future. And talking of the future, Ducati is well on the way to shaping the future of its own electric sport bikes. It doesn't have an electric model at the moment, and it will probably be at least 3 years until we see one, but it's definitely coming. Research and development in this regard has already begun in earnest, because the Moto E Championship that runs at the European rounds of MotoGP and currently features Energica bikes will see competitors all riding Ducati's new electric racer from next year. Ducati MotoGP test rider Michele Pirro and ex-GP and Moto E rider Alex De Angelis have been doing a lot of the riding and development work since the bike first hit the track in December of last year. The early prototype is shown here testing at the Vallelunga circuit in the hands of De Angelis, and although there's nothing in the press release in terms of details, it is nice to see the bike in action and to hear it, not roaring around the track, but rather whining around the track. Continuing with the theme of the near future, I just want to quickly mention something that popped up on the TV news bulletin that I watched just before I sat down to record these news stories. I had no idea this was so close, but from next year, all cars sold in the EU will have to feature speed limiters. These use GPS mapping data to work out where you are and what speed you should be doing, and then they can limit your speed by providing some pressure on your accelerator to push back against your foot, or they might supposedly reduce the car's power. You'll be able to override the system by mashing your foot on the accelerator, but not before you've had this unpleasant little argument with your car's throttle. The technology is still being refined for motorcycles, but it is 100% definitely coming. And don't think this is an EU problem only. For ease of production, all cars and bikes will soon be fitted with the technology, and then it's just about whether your own government will use the technology, which will of course also be able to keep a record of your speed at all times. No more worrying about whether your momentary speeding was caught by a roadside camera, because your bike or your car will soon be spying on you all the time, everywhere you go. And on that cheery note, let's have an ad break.